All right, welcome back to Business AM. We're just conversing with our guest today, Andrew, on exactly what's going on in the economy as concerns BBI. He tells me we just wait and see. It's interesting times, isn't it? For us, we only look at it from the economic perspective. Yeah. If we can actually get the 35% of the national income to go to the counties, and also get the 70% just to go into development, then we're good to go. That's the only good thing for us, as opposed to who's going to be the president or who's not going to be. That's interesting. All right, let's therefore cross over to another interesting factor that we are also looking at now. We're looking at the Kenyan economy as we start 2020. Everybody keeps on telling us that it's going to be the toughest time yet. So now Kenya's economy is projected to grow by 5.9% this year, helped by improvement in tea production and export, among other factors. And according to Stanbic Microeconomic 2020 Outlook report, Kenya's tea export market demand is likely to increase this year in countries such as Pakistan and Egypt. Economists further project that the tourism sector will remain stable, even as more investment in the private sector flows into the sector. On the monetary policy front, analysts at the Stanbic Bank say borrowers are likely to get loans at lower rates, as the Central Bank of Kenya's Monetary Policy Committee is likely to cut its policy rate following the removal of the interest rate capping towards the end of last year. Let's therefore look at exactly what they're talking about before we sit down and discuss about this morning. All right, that's exactly what it is that we're talking about this morning. They're saying agriculture, the repeal of the cap on interest rates, and if the government starts releasing money to its, in terms of pending bills, really. Let's just talk about that this morning. Now, Andrew, I just want us to begin it from pending bills. Yeah. I know you know exactly what is happening in the counties right now, is that almost 14 counties that we're talking about that are not actually going to receive or are yet to receive their full funds because of pending bills. Do you think that, yes, if we start to release money or start to settle the pending bills, therefore, to most of the people within the economy, then this 5.9% growth rate points that we're talking about here are going to get achieved?
Not necessarily.
Yes.
But I think it's one of the great things that the new Minister for Finance has done.
Yes.
Is insisting on clearing up pending bills.
Yes.
Because how do businesses operate? They operate through working capital. Mm-hmm. So if you do not pay them, they do not have money to undertake other important functions of production and such like things. Otherwise, you're going to make them close.
Yes.
If they close, this contribution that we so anticipate to be injected back to the economy is not going to happen.
Yes.
So pending bills payment is really pertinent to the growth of the economy.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's another factor that I really want us to attach to that as well, as we actually even get to talk about what the attorney is also talking about in terms of pending bills. But does it work against the economy? Because in this sense, these counties also do need this money to actually get the businesses running. We're talking about promoting some of the projects, despite the fact that we're given some damning report on how some counties are not actually going into any development projects. If you say that you're not going to release the money to the counties, are you not working counter-interactively in the sense that there is no money in the counties? That means that most of the businesses are not actually flourishing, as opposed now to dealing with the other businesses that you've not actually given this money.
In my view, two things.
Yes.
One, this money was initially released to the counties.
Yes.
But in terms of prioritizing what to make these payments for, I think the counties got it wrong at some point. Mm-hmm. So the government, by directing that they pay or they do not give any other more funding until these bills are cleared, I think will work retrospective, because in a way they're going to affect the county's operations.
Yes.
You know what will happen is you're not giving counties money to operate. Yet they've made mistakes before.
Yes.
So in my view is that let them correct the mistakes by probably, forgetting the past, and going forward we say that now that you did not clear any bills in the past, so going forward let's be doing that, but you cannot paralyze operations, because it will be counterproductive at the end of the day.
Yes.
So
that's fine. Yeah. Everybody's talking about 5.9%. It's not actually only Stanbic that is talking about it. Yeah. The IMF and the World Bank are also looking at 5.9 percentage points. I just want us to look at another damning report that the IMF is also giving us, now that we're talking about this 5.9%. Everybody also does know that is the government's investments in government projects that are actually works in their favor, in that they are actually getting to collect more money that they get to pump back into the economy. But there was this report that was released the other day about us having projects that need 1 trillion shillings for us to get jump-started. There was money that was pumped into it. All these projects are stalled, and by that fact, we're not going to get anything from it unless we actually invest another 1 trillion shillings into it. Now, the new CS, Yatani, is saying, I don't expect to actually invest money into these projects, because it wants to cut the government expenditure to just 23% of the gross domestic product and reduce the deficit to just 3.5% of also the national budget. Do you think that they've not really looked at this deeply, in the sense that if these projects that we're talking about, and most of them fall in the Big Four agenda, are not giving us anything, and they need more money in 2020 for them to realize something, if they're not giving us anything, then the 5.9% starts to get questioned from that perspective?
One of the things that I think we've talked about in this particular platform is the government planning. And probably feasibility studies.
Yes.
Feasibility studies. How do our ministers or the guys concerned with carrying out feasibility studies, how do they do them? Because if you tell us that this particular project is going to realize returns after this particular period of time, do we probably go in and look at the payback period itself? How long will it take for this particular project to start realizing returns? And if the answer is the affirmative, that we're going to realize returns in good time, then we go ahead and implement the project, and then later start saying that we need to pump in more, then there's a problem somewhere.
Yes.
And probably this government needs to relook into how we evaluate projects before we invest in them.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Another one that nobody is actually talking about, because we're actually expecting for Stanbic and IMF to actually consider that. Yatani, he said that we expect a leaner budget come 2020-2021. He's saying, I'm actually going to give you money on a need basis. So for the very first time, we're actually going to have budget that is directed to some areas that they want the money to go to. So when we have a leaner budget, does that mean that also the economy actually gets to feel this leaner budget? Because we do expect that we are going to have cutbacks in terms of our expenditure. Does that also work against the 5.9%?
Well, I think it will work against the 5.9% projection.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, I keep asking myself, we project that we are going to grow by 5.9%. But how much of that is going to be felt to the common mwananchi, in terms of what is really the per capita income? Does it change when we realize that if we were to achieve this 5.9% growth?
Yes.
Are we going to feel a difference in our pockets? Because that is what we need to work towards. And when we're talking about budget cuts, it's really survival, because the economy cannot collapse simply because we want to spend and appear like we are implementing the budget. So what the minister is doing now is trying to carry out austerity measures to ensure that we are, at least operating, so that we get to the next budget cycle. As we try, is trying to sort of, go back to the drawing board and ensure that things are running.
Yes.
So right now we are not going to be worried about what is going to go to development, but rather how we're going to survive so that the economy does not collapse outrightly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, there's another big one, the cap on interest rates. I mean, it was repealed some 5 months ago. Now we're headed to the 6th month now. You would think that now that the banks would actually start to give us products that are actually tuned to go back into the mass market. We've not seen it. The Central Bank of Kenya lending rate was just reduced by 0.5 basis points. We're talking about 8.5 from 9%, meaning that they're also looking to appease both sides. The lending rate is not so high, not so low, so you can actually retain the status quo. they're actually pointing out to this, that this is one of those factors again that are actually supposed to contribute to the 5.9%. But Andrew, we've not seen anything happen so far. I know we're going to look at exactly how much the money has gone to the mass market, but in terms of the lending rates, we're still talking about 13%. No bank has actually come up and said, okay, now we are ready to give money to the mass market, but we're going to push it at 14%, 15%, because that's exactly what they're fighting for. And that's the only way that we can start saying that the cap on interest rates is actually doing its job. But it's not. We're still talking about 13%. Do you think that this lending rate, this cap on interest rates that we're talking about here, is still partly into the 5.9%, or it's time we forget about it? Because the way things look, status quo is actually what we're talking about.
Now, Steve, I want to take you back to our discussion last year.
Yes.
I think we pretty much talked about this cap, and it was dangerous to the economy.
Yes.
And I've been one of those critics of the capping of interest rates, because it's not good to the economy at all. Now, it has been repealed. As we had projected, is that the only way that we were going to grow the economy is by, repealing the interest rate cap, which was done. Well, that is good. Now, going forward, what will happen? If you want to grow small businesses, give them credit. Now, how much willing the banks will be depends on how risky the borrowers will be.
Yes.
And going forward, if the government still depends on borrowing from the domestic market, then there's competition. If there's going to be that competition again, then still the banks are better off lending to the government compared to the small businesses. And if you're not going to lend to small businesses, then growth will not be attained as targeted.
Yes.
So we need to be very careful to have that mix. But the banks, they want to fast absorb this particular news. They are taking their time, they are adjusting and readjusting to ensure that even as they lend, they have done or carried out the evaluation correctly.
Do you think it's time overdue? I mean, the way the banks were really fighting this law when it was actually operationalized in 2016, you would think that it was the main reason as to why the economy was at a standstill. And you would think that it would now react immediately to exactly how they wanted to balance it. What do you think is going on in the economy, Andrew, that 6 months down the line, there's still a wait-and-see approach from the banks?
Well, I think from the reports that are out here, they're saying that lending to the private sector has increased compared to the previous period.
Yes.
Yeah, it has gone up compared to the previous period. And even if it's slow, everything, a reaction to change. People are still not sure which way. So probably by the end of this particular financial year, we're going to have a great change.
Yes.
So we can only observe and see.
Yes. Yeah. We're actually going to look at that this morning, next on exactly how the mass lending has improved from the lending sector in this country. I also want us to look at another one now that is really pertinent. And everybody questions it. Now, they're telling us that the tea sector is actually going to be one of those areas that we're going to see a lot of improvement in terms of contributing to the GDP. But we do know that in a decade now, farmers are crying of the lowest bonuses when it comes to the tea earnings in this country. Yes, we can say that we're still on. We did actually export 476 million kgs last year when we go back to 2018. But what is really pertinent is that we're actually now talking about the lowest bonuses in this country. And when we're talking about the tea sector, everybody is saying it's not just about having tea. It's about value addition to our tea. That's the only thing that is going to make our tea therefore contribute to the national domestic, gross domestic product. Do you think, now that we have a new man in our office, yes, we have Peter Munya now, who seems to be calling shots already in that department, do you think that if we don't find ways around our tea, that tea is going to contribute to the gross domestic product come the end of 2020?
In my view, two things. You look at the middlemen that are involved in the whole process.
Yes.
What is their contribution? Because sometimes, how do we even market our tea? Because I believe that our tea is among the best that the world can produce.
Yes.
But how do we go ahead out there to market it and package it so that we're able to get the best out of it? And what is the role of middlemen in this particular exercise, in this particular process? Because even in terms of bonuses that the farmers receive at the end of the day, that affects their operations and everything, the middlemen reap the best
Yes.
at the end of the day. But is that meant to be the case?
Yes.
So the minister really, Peter Munya, has a lot at stake that he needs to prove to this particular country that now he's coming and is going to come up with policies that are
Yes.
going to deal with this particular middleman, so that at the end of the day, the farmers are gonna, reap more compared to the middlemen.
Yes.
Because if the middlemen keep on making money out of the poor farmers, then this particular economy is still dwindled.
Yes.
Yeah.
From what you said, therefore, as we move on to the next one, do you believe, Andrew, that the 5.9% is possible come 2020?
In my view, with the current conditions,
Yes.
it's quite a hard, an uphill task to
Yes.
achieve. Yeah.
Yes.
And we will evaluate that at the end of the financial year.
Pretty much.
It may not be achieved.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. I just want us, therefore, to cross over to the next issue this morning that we're looking at. Now, the National Treasury should spend within its means to reduce pressure from the mounting debt. Now, Treasury CS Ukur Yatani stressed the need to retain austerity measures beyond the current financial year. In 2019, Kenya's public debt hit, now wait for it, 6 trillion Kenyan shillings, triple the amount the debt when the government that is current, right, took over in 2013. Now, Kenya's budgetary needs have grown steadily, partly due to the huge infrastructural projects such as the standard gauge railway. However, revenues have stagnated, thus failing to meet infrastructural and recurrent expenditure needs. Therefore, the government has been borrowing from the domestic and external markets to finance these projects. Now, according to the central bank data in September 2019, total debt stood at 5.9 trillion, comprising of 2.8 trillion in domestic debt and 3.1 trillion in external debt. Question therefore being, what is the best way to go about these austerity measures? Yatani says there's only one. In the short term, look for money to pay the expensive loans, okay? And then in the long term now, move towards cheaper bilateral loans. That's exactly what we're getting told, that commercial loans are expensive, that for the next few years, I'm just going to look for money to settle them. Then after that, whatever money we're going to use to settle these loans is going to be from cheaper loans. Do you think that's a good model? Do you think that's the only way to go to correct the kind of hole that what teach actually dug us into?
In my view, Simba, is that the minister is doing a great job, honestly, because we are looking at, he's now acting financial.
Yes.
Because if you're talking about retiring expensive loans in place of cheaper loans, that is the way to go, but it may not be the only one. Because we've talked about corruption. What is the role of corruption in this entire thing? How much of this that we borrowed actually that has been swindled? Probably more than 30%.
Yes.
30% is not 2 shillings, my friend. So we need to really ensure that even as he does that, he needs to look at ways in which he can cut down on expenses.
Yes.
He's doing great on that.
Yes.
And if that is going to happen, then going forward, we are going to to be sustainable. So that even as we borrow, we borrow only on a need basis.
Yes.
We do not just borrow because we need to borrow.
Yes.
And as it were, you cannot
Yes.
borrow for recurrent. You
Yes.
only borrow for development expenditure.
Yes. This is what the critics of Yatani come in. We do know. He'll come in. We've seen him criticize, will teach. I said, I don't just like the way in which he was getting this money, even the expenditure as well in the budget. Now, you do know that the budget that we're using actually right now was, quote unquote, not constitutional. Didn't go through all the stages. But here's the question. Is it possible that you can step into an office and then they say your fiscal policy for the whole of 2020, 2021 is going to be correctional? Because that is the only thing that we're saying from Yatani. Is it possible to run government business through just a correctional model? That the only thing that I'm doing is correcting what my predecessor actually did. Is that not going to get midway and then Yatani realizes, I can't just have a fiscal policy that looks correctional. I gotta spend. Because I cannot actually just come in and say and tell you the only thing I'm going to do is correct whoever left office did. Is that not where the question should start? Because you should be telling us, yes, I'm going to correct, but at the same time, I'm going to do this. We are not getting the other side of it.
One thing I don't agree with the new CS is
Yes.
that, you know, how government operates, you can come from whatever kind of background and still be the Minister for Finance. You must not be an economist or financial expert.
And that's the only thing that guys are questioning about your time.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you have the directors,
ability.
technical, you know, the technical team, and this is the same team.
Yes.
Nobody has been changed.
Yes.
You know, so he can come with his own mind, but he'll be told this does not operate this way. I can tell you that his predecessor was a serious economist, actually revered by his peers.
Yes.
You know, but look at the kind of decisions he made. That when we look at them from, you know, after he has left office, we think he made a lot of mistakes. Yet he was a serious economist.
Yes.
So it's not about which qualification this particular CS has that the other one did not have. But now, if we're going to correct, it's a good thing to do. But going forward, what is going to be done so that all these past ills are not going to be repeated?
Yes.
So that we are going to contribute positively
Yes.
to the growth of the economy, even as we propose or make budget proposals.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do you think, therefore, that, I mean, we saw when it was in acting capacity, it did raise the government borrowing cap to 9 trillion shillings.
Yeah.
But he comes back and tells us, yes, I'm just going to reduce it to 3.5% of the national gross domestic product. I'm actually, expenditure is going to be 23% of the national budget. That's fine.
Yeah.
But don't you think that this is the big mistake that we also need to tell him? Now, there is a law here that actually was telling you can't borrow beyond 50% of your GDP. It is actually therefore talking about austerity measures. Shouldn't he go back and review this and tell us, no, the 9 trillion cap that we're talking about here is not so good because we gotta spend from our GDP. And also number 2, he said he's actually calling on KRA to try and collect 20% of our GDP. Is that not where the weak point comes in? Because we know KRA is not going to collect that. I mean, they have never collected that. Don't you think that's where it begins now for his plan to get hit by the rain? And then at the end of 2021, we're going to talk about taking knee-jerk reactions. Because if your fiscal policy is just correctional, at the end of the day, there's other demands that you need from the other side.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
So in my view is that, you know, at the end of the day, KRA is the greatest contributor to the budget.
Yes.
So even as we give them targets, we should give them realistic budgets so that even as we budget and, you know, intend to spend a given amount of money,
Yes.
we are not only, you know, intending to spend, but we should also look at how much we need to raise.
Yes.
And if what we intend to raise does not match up, then we cut our expenses way before. But even as we undertake cuts, you know, a government is not like a company where you can cut and you do not make additional investments. Because if you do not invest, then it means you're not, in future, you're going to be in trouble.
Pretty much.
And after this particular government, then the coming president and the coming forthcoming governments are going to have or be in trouble.
Yes.
So even as it does or he makes all these decisions, yes, the buck stops with him, but he should really embrace consultations.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're waiting to see exactly what's going on. He's already started the budgetary hearings. We're waiting for them to end. And then after that, the bigger shock is going to come June. The budgetary cuts.
Yeah.
All right. Now, in November 2019, the private sector, all right, let me just change it. Good. Now, in November 2019, Stephanie, so let's keep on. In November 2019, now, private sector credit, you're just going to look at that story again, just trying to find it. Fine, we have it. Now in November 2019, private sector credit growth did actually jump from, do we have it, Stephanie? Good. Jumped to 7.3% after a prolonged period of slow growth. This is welcome news for many businesses that lacked access to funds. Now, the hike in credit growth in the private sector followed the removal of the interest rate cap law in 2019. In the past 5 years, Kenya suffered sluggish growth in private sector credit. Now, the rate fell to its lowest level in October 2017 when it posted 2% growth. With limited access to loans, small and medium-sized enterprises endured harsh times as some businesses closed down or halted their expansion plans. As a result, people lost their jobs and the SME sector recorded reduced productivity during the period. Since the red caps law was repealed in the last quarter of 2019, banks have increased the lending to the private sector. Additionally, banking stocks have registered remarkable gains in that period, with the two leading lenders, KCB Group and Equity Group, posting share prices appreciation of about 24% and 50% respectively. So the question being, what does this growth acceleration mean for business in the private sector? And is that news enough that banks now have started pushing money to the mass market? I mean, they were not making losses even when we had the cap on interest rates fully operational.
In my view, it's news in the sense that now the SMEs are going to access loans.
Yes.
Because let me tell you, the banks were shy from lending for the simple reason of, given the caps, then it was possible to, it was not possible to evaluate lenders based on their risk,
yes,
as it were.
Yes.
So if you're not evaluating lenders based on their risk, so you're only giving credit and you're not looking at how risky they are,
yes,
then it looks like at the end of the day, your level of non-performing loans, which you're going to be required to write off at the end of the financial year, and they are going to contribute to your losses, then if those non-performing loans are going to increase,
yes,
then you're going to incur losses. So the banks were better off lending to government, at that particular point in time.
Yes.
And if you review the period, even individual borrowers, initially you could walk into a bank, you're working, you present your payslip, and you get a loan. Nowadays, I mean, when the rates were capped, that was not possible any longer. So, but now that this has been repealed, it's possible to access credit. So if you're able to access credit, you're able to inject into your business.
Yes.
But now the question will be, how are you going to utilize this particular credit? Are you going to utilize it to pay salaries? Of course not. So if you pay salaries, it means you're getting it wrong. So
yes,
unless you're using it for capital expenditures and things like those, then that is when we can be able to accelerate growth in the private sector.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I will take you back to the other question there for the Andrew. I mean, yes, the banks are now willing to lend, but they were crying about not having the ability to price these different facilities that were pushing to the mass market. That was the question. But we've not seen any change so far.
Now, the issue is really what really constitutes this pricing of loans.
Yes.
In my view, it's been a mix of several, and this has been proven by research.
Yes.
It is through the size of the particular bank that is pricing this particular product,
yes,
the risk that is involved in lending to this particular customer,
yes,
and many other variables that you can talk about, even the operational expenses of the bank. So it's not entirely on how risky the particular client is, but sometimes we really blame, the banks used to blame the capping so much, but it's a mix of several variables that go into the pricing of this particular product.
Yes.
So even the banks needed to reevaluate themselves and see whether they are doing everything right, so that as they price the loans, they get the best out of it. Yeah.
And that's exactly what we expect to see in 2020. Do you think the government needs to work very hard to make sure that the mass market or the business environment in the country in 2020 is so good to the point that even the banks now will get attracted to the mass market?
How do we make the business environment good? Of course, do not push the businesses to pay taxes that they are not meant to pay,
yes, yes,
and things like those. Then to also ensure that the marketability of the products in terms of the environment within which the political stability that we are talking about. Now that we have BBI, and everybody is all inclusive. So we expect that even investors will flock from the outside to come and really accelerate growth in this particular economy. Because at the end of the day, if the political environment is stable, then everybody else is comfortable.
Pretty much. All right.
That is the duty of the government.
Andrew, Unfortunately, we've run out of time. This was one of the best conversations we've ever had together.
Thank you.
Way to start 2020. All right, that's exactly what we had for you this morning. But if you really want to look at exactly how the economy is going to perform, numbers are getting thrown. We're talking about 5.9%. They're also telling us that the agriculture sector, which we do know carries the GDP of our economy, is also bound to grow by 5.9%. Is that going to be possible? We only have to wait. 2020 is just starting yet. This is Business IM. You can actually catch a recap of this conversation with Andrew. The only thing you need to go to YouTube, search Metropole TV Kenya. You can actually take us back a couple of minutes and get his talking points. He says, we have to wait and see. Good morning. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Gig.